one of the myths that we have in our society is that we wait to find tasks that we think we're going to enjoy all day. And that's what a perfect job is. And I don't believe that's true. I think the perfect job is the job that enables you to achieve the outcome you desire, even if you don't love all the tasks that you have to do all day.
Welcome everybody back to the Catch Fire Show this week. I'm your host, Simon Yost. And this week, Todd Henry joins us. Todd is the founder of The Accidental Creative and now 5-time author of books, including The Accidental Creative and his most recent book, Motivation Code, which we'll talk about today. I started listening to Todd in 2005, and he has been a mentor and hero of mine for about 15 years now. I first met Todd through his work and then in St. Louis in 2010, and have continued to follow him as he's most recently spoken at events like the Leadership Summit, which is a worldwide broadcast to hundreds of thousands of people, and he did that in 2019. Todd's an international speaker. He's spoken all around the world to creatives and creative leaders how to be brilliant at a moment's notice. So that's who we're going to hear from today, right after this. Todd, thanks for joining us today. You're over in Cincinnati, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I think we just set a record for the only team in the history of the major leagues to be booted from the playoffs without scoring a single run or something. Yeah, we're still a little heartbroken over that. And I know that's you guys are in St. Louis, right? You've had a little more success of late, but the Reds are coming up on your heels, so just be careful.
Yeah. And the Cubs, but yeah, it's baseball's crazy. And then the Bengals. Do you have any hope this year, or do you follow Bengals?
I have hope every year, but it's like Lucy and Charlie Brown with the football. This is the time I'm going to kick the football, and she snatches it back at the last minute, and that's what it's always like with the Bengals. But listen, I love. Sorry, I don't want to dive into like a whole sports thing here, but I love Joe Burrow and his energy, and I just love the way that they're really rebuilding this team around the new ethic, and so I'm hopeful for the future. I am.
That's cool. I found you several years ago, maybe circa 2003, when you started your podcast. I tuned in my dorm room. Does that sound about right as far as date?
Probably been about 2005, maybe. That's when the show started in earnest. That's when I started producing episodes.
So I remember opening up one of the first MacBooks I got and opening up iTunes and searching for creative podcasts, and Accidental Creative was the first one I latched onto. Yeah. And I have learned a ton since then. And so I think October 7th release of Motivation Code marks your 5th book. Is that correct?
It was my 5th book in the last 10 years. Yeah. So the Accidental Creative released in 2011. So this will be the 5th book in 10 years. Yeah. Which is crazy when you put it that way. But yeah, it's been a pretty fun run. And the good news is that when you research, and this is true of any kind of creative work, when you research, when you write, when you're doing the work itself reveals whatever the next work is going to be. And so that's been the case for all of my books, is that as I'm researching and writing, I'm discovering things that are like threads I want to pull, but I can't pull them now. I have to pull them later because I don't have, they don't fit into this book or they don't fit into this project, whatever it is. And so I just set them aside, and that becomes the next thing that I work on. So each book is led to the next in that way.
Oh, that's great. Because I think for me, I'm sure there's many themes of your work and your one-liners, cover bands don't change the world, things like that I remember a lot. But it seems like one of the themes is how to stay healthy as a create-on-demand professional, and then how to lead teams so they're healthy. And when I saw the new title, Motivation Code, it struck me, normally those type of people have just like this overwhelming drive or intrinsic motivation. And so how'd you come across this idea to bring the Motivation Code into the next work?
Yeah. So about 4 years ago, a friend of mine, Rod Penner, who was a 20-year veteran of a management consulting firm, contacted me out of the blue. And he had left the management consulting firm years before, but I didn't know what he'd been working on since then. And he said, "Hey, I'd like for you to take this motivation assessment I've been working on." And I don't know about you, Simon, but when I hear assessment, my eyes start to roll in the back of my head. And I think, great, I need another set of letters to attach to myself. But listen, I trusted Rod. So I took the assessment. And quite frankly, what I discovered absolutely blew me away. Absolutely blew me away. I saw at the end of taking the Motivation Code assessment, the reason behind a lot of my decisions I've made in my life, why certain kinds of work energize me, other kinds of work doesn't energize me, even though it's the opposite for many of my peers and my friends. areas of conflict in my life, why they exist, and how I might be able to move beyond them. Really, just so many things were laid out in front of me. And I realized at that moment, I wanted to get this work into the world and let other people experience it as well. There was a small problem, though, and that was that I was already under contract and in the middle of writing my other book called Herding Tigers that came out in 2018. I've been working on this book in the background for about 4 years, working on it with Rod and Dr. Todd Hall and Dr. Joshua Miller, and really pulling this together and leveraging their over 50 years of research into this topic. And so finally now, after 4 years, the book is ready to be put out in the world where it belongs. And the Motivation Code Assessment is finally going to be put out there where it belongs. And I'm really excited to see what happens.
Do you feel like this might be a secret, but do you feel like there's any bits that have leaked out in talks that you've given or things like that throughout the years?
Yeah, for sure. The funny thing is, it's like the fun thing about the whole thing is that while it's based on, as I mentioned, over 50 years of research, it began really in the late 1960s and was conducted over the course of all that time with top leaders in industry, really people from all walks of life. It's always fun to come in as an author and be able to put your own unique spin on it. And what's funny is that even before I was exposed to all of this, I'd written a chapter on motivation in Herding Tigers, where I talked about 3 profiles based on the work of another friend of mine, David Weiser, where he had talked about builders, fixers, and optimizers as 3 kind of profiles. And the funny thing is that those align really closely with some of the motivational themes that we discovered in Motivation Code. Yeah. So again, you kind of see that work carrying forward into this book, that some of those themes really continue to apply to this work as well. But yeah, it's always hard to work on. I struggle to work on multiple big projects at the same time, which is why I was working on it in the background, but I put it on hold until I had locked the manuscript for Herding Tigers. And then it was full guns blazing from that point on.
Especially with books are huge projects, and there's a lot of threads, so to speak, in just one book, let alone multiple. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, for sure. And you want to make sure that each book is its own thing. It's its own idea set. You want to make sure that books aren't cannibalizing from one another, that there aren't too many overlaps. And if you're writing multiple books at the same time, you can't help but have your mind go in the same direction for both of them. And that's just not a good thing. You want to make sure the book is going where it needs to go, not where you need it to go, so that you can actually write it at that moment in time.
Yeah. It's like the opposite of movie scripts, like trilogy movie scripts or something.
Exactly.
So I haven't even had a chance to take the M Code assessment yet, but would you mind sharing any takeaways that you had when you took the assessment? Did you notice any changes in your interactions with folks or the way you approach?
So really what we've discovered and what the M Code assessment does is it identifies 27 unique themes of motivation. And those 27 themes live within 6 families. So just like you have similarities with your biological family, right? Like my biological sister and I have similarities in our DNA. You might be able to tell that we're siblings if you saw us together, but we're very different in terms of our personality and how we play out. And in the same way, these motivational themes share some DNA with other themes. So we put them into families, but they're very different in terms of how they play out in practice. We really focus on the theme level in terms of identifying what your motivation code is. Your motivation code the motivation code as we define it is your top 3 to 5 themes and how those themes affect you and how they interact with and interplay with one another. So my top themes, for example, my very top theme is something that we call make an impact. And make an impact means that I am driven to see impact from my work. That's what I really want at the heart of it. So if I don't see the direct impact from the work that I'm doing, then it's hard for me to stay engaged, hard for me to stay motivated. So you can imagine in the time of COVID, how that's playing out for me right now, where I'm used to speaking on stage in front of thousands of people. And now all of a sudden I'm speaking into a camera to people and I can see them like 3 or 4 at a time if I'm doing it over Zoom or something, but it's not the same as being in a room with a bunch of people and seeing the tangible impact of my work. So I've had to adapt my expectations in my work to make sure that I am seeing impact, because one of what we call the shadow side attributes of that motivation, every motivation's a gift, but there's also a shadow side. And one of the shadow sides is that sometimes people driven to make an impact try to make an impact even where it's not welcome. So if I don't see the impact of my work, I might start trying to make an impact where I'm not necessarily welcomed. And one way that happens, for example, like if I'm invited into a meeting where I'm just supposed to sit in the back and just audit the the meeting or something, guarantee you within 7 minutes, standing at the whiteboard with a marker in my hand, already like mapping out, and hey, what if we did this? Or hey, let's try it, just because that's such a part of who I am. My number 2 motivation is what's called meet the challenge, meaning I like concrete, discrete challenges that allow me to feel like I've overcome something in the short term. So long arc projects like writing a book don't challenge me. I don't feel challenged by that because it's such a long arc project. I go looking for short-term challenges in the midst of that. So I might sit down and crank through my email inbox, and that really charges me up when I really need to be writing. But the reason I do that is because it feels like a challenge to me to get through my inbox versus writing. I'm like, I've got a year to do that. Doesn't feel challenging to me. What I've had to do is structure my work so that even like my book writing is a series of mini challenges. I'll tell myself, I need to write 500 words by 9:30 this morning in order to make it feel more challenging to me. And once I do, I feel engaged, I feel invested, because I don't like to write. It's not something I enjoy doing, but bringing that motivation to my writing reframes it completely. So that's an example of, and then my number 3 is influence behavior. So I want to see other people, like right now you're nodding as we're speaking, and that like really charges me up because I see that you're kind of tracking with me. Sometimes people will accuse me. This is part of the shadow side. People will accuse me of saying the same thing over and over. You've said the same thing 5 times now. I'm saying, I know, but I'm just waiting for you to acknowledge to me that it got through because I want to influence behavior. That's how I'm wired. Now, those are my top 3 and they all interact with one another. But some people, for example, maybe one of their top 3 is collaborate, meaning that right now they're really struggling because they're probably working from home. They're probably not in the team setting very often. And even though they might jump on Zoom, those Zoom calls feel very transactional. And so maybe work that once really charged them up doesn't quite charge them up the same anymore because they're not able to be with other people, or some people are driven by what we call the serve motivation. It's really hard to serve people when you're not right next to them, when you're not in proximity to them. And so some people are being robbed of some of the natural circumstances that lead to activating those motivations. And so once we understand how we're wired, what it is that drives us, where we get our motivational energy, we can begin to structure our life and our days and our interactions in a way that activates that motivational energy. And we bring our motivation to our tasks instead of waiting for our tasks to motivate us.
That sounds, I'm going to go take the assessment now.
Yeah.
It sounds great. Do you mind if we switch gears a little bit?
No, sure, please.
So one of the topics of this podcast we wanted to bring is charting non-traditional career paths. And I don't think we have time, unfortunately, to go through your whole story, but you said something a minute ago that really struck a chord with me, and that is that writing wasn't one of your favorite things to do.
Right.
And I am around a lot of people that are just kind of when I get to this point, and I'm just going to be honest, sometimes I look at you and you're one of my heroes and I'm like, oh, if I could, speak like Todd. Talk about, since you don't like writing, why is it such a big part of what you do?
It is because it's the best way for me to achieve the impact that I so desire. I love speaking because that's a very tangible, concrete thing where I can immediately see the impact of my work because I'm speaking directly to people and I can see them reacting to what I'm saying. But writing is a great way to get ideas into the world. It's a great way for people to digest what you're thinking. And it's really the most concise way to do that. And that is really, it's a vehicle that I chose to achieve the outcome that I want, even though it's not necessarily a task that I enjoy, that I love. And so I think sometimes one of the myths that we have in our society is that we wait to find tasks that we think we're going to enjoy all day. And that's what a perfect job is. And I don't believe that's true. I think the perfect job is the job that enables you to achieve the outcome you desire, even if you don't love all the tasks that you have to do all day. I think that's the very definition of having passion for your job. And while I tell myself this all the time, I don't like to write, but I'm not out, digging ditches or there are a lot of things that's the go-to. I'm not meaning to disparage digging ditches, but that's the go-to slog work because you have to do it, whether it's hot or cold or raining or dry or whatever, like you're out there digging the ditch. But in many ways, like that's what it feels like to me when I'm writing. It's like, all right, let's crank it out. I mean, right now I'm in book launch mode. So I'm cranking out articles for all these publications and 700 words here and 900 words there and just on all kinds of topics. And it's not my favorite thing in the world to do, but I realize on the other side of that is going to be impact that I'm going to love. And so that's what keeps me moving forward. So we can't fall prey to the idea that the perfect job is a job where we just enjoy the tasks. We're going to enjoy some of the tasks, of course. And maybe over time, we gain more flexibility to really structure our life around just the tasks that we want more and more. But we have to earn that. We have to earn, and nobody has a job where they only get to do what they want to do all day. Instead, we need to look for a job that gives us the ability to have the impact that we want on the other side.
Something else that I'm hearing and take us in the right direction here, but there's a scale with this impact, even to pre-COVID versus now. Like I'm in the office all day and I might have a series of even just a few conversations that might seem to be high impact, or when I look back at my day, it might be like, oh, this is where I really connected with someone, or this is where we really pushed the ball forward. When you are saying, oh, you remind yourself of the impact that your work's going to have, but it's so corporate, it's so big, you're pushing it out to thousands and thousands of people. What are some of the ways that then you reconnect with that impact?
Yeah, it's a really good question. For me, numbers don't really mean a lot. I know the podcast I do is downloaded millions of times a year, and those numbers don't really mean anything. They mean a lot to our advertisers, but they don't really mean a lot to me personally, because it's not just about numbers. It's about the impact that I'm having through the people who are, or for the people who are listening to that. And getting a couple of emails from people saying, hey, here's how your show impacted me, that will keep me charged up for weeks, versus just seeing download numbers go up or just seeing metrics go up. That's fine, but that doesn't really charge me. But what charges me is, on the other side of this, is somebody who might be really struggling right now. I just had to talk the other day with somebody from an organization who had invited me to come in and speak to their organization. And this person was saying, I started listening to your podcast and I was going through a season where I really needed someone who understood what I was going through. And you were speaking directly to me. And now, all these years later, I'm asking you to come speak to the organization that I work for because you were able to help me in that time of need. That's huge for me. Like, just that number doesn't matter, but just knowing that impact. Now, for some people, to get back to motivation code, for some people, it's going to be like, let's say I'm a podcaster. I need a team because I'm wired to collaborate. And I want to make sure that whatever I'm doing it with other people. So for that person, it's more about the collective team effort of putting a podcast into the world, or sharing our ideas with other people. Or for some people who might be driven to comprehend and express, for them, it might be, I want to learn new things all the time and then share those things with people. And that's what drives them. That's the satisfaction they get. Any number of people could be driven to do the same thing for very different reasons, depending on where they get their motivational energy. Yeah, but for me, it's reconnecting with the personal stories of people who have been impacted by what I'm doing.
And then just to touch on COVID a little bit, it seems like you've at least heard from a few practitioners or folks that follow you that are connected with the creative community. Over the course of COVID, have you heard any themes that have come out, good or bad, of how their world is changing or how they've had to reframe?
Yeah, I just finished doing a series of live workshops online for people called Creative Leader Roundtable. And a consistent theme was it's difficult because everything feels transactional right now. Zoom calls feel transactional. It's not like we're in the same space. It doesn't feel like we have a relationship. It feels like we're going to get online, do this transaction, and then, jump off. And so it's just hard to build any kind of team culture right now. It's hard to create an environment because, and also the other thing to remember is everybody's in different places. Like, some people maybe lost a loved one to all this madness. Some people might be really struggling with a lot of the justice issues that are going on in our culture right now, and struggling in a way that some other people maybe aren't as much. People have different perspectives on that stuff. We're in the midst of political turmoil. As we're speaking right now, we just found out the president of the United States was tested positive for COVID. Everything's coming at us so fast right now that it feels like that anxiety is bubbling just beneath the surface all the time. And so the question becomes, how do we structure our lives to ensure that we have the space, the focus, the energy that we need to be able to bring our best work to the table every day? And those rhythms are going to look very different now than they did 6 months ago. Because I think 6 months ago, everybody was thinking, man, if I could just work from home all the time, that would be awesome. If I could work in my pajamas all day and never had to change and go. And I think a lot of people right now are thinking, man, if I could just get in the car and drive to an office and sit at a desk all day and be around people, that would be amazing. It's funny how our perspective has changed. Now that we're doing this, we realize, oh, maybe somewhere in the middle is actually a better solution. Maybe one day at home a week or something. But we don't realize how much we need that. And so that's the consistent theme I'm hearing, is that the anxiety is, we didn't realize how much had been stolen from us until we'd been doing this for a while. And I think right now, many people are starting to feel the tension of just the anxiety that's bubbling beneath the surface constantly.
Yeah. I know that a lot of your work talks about rhythms, and you mentioned that the rhythms are going to change. I've noticed even in my work that sometimes it's hard to get into a flow state. Like I'm task switching more. I know you've worked from home and stuff for a long time. Do you have any tips for bouncing between meetings and stuff like that? How do you frame that up for yourself?
Yeah, time blocking is the thing to do every day. I'll show you actually. I've never done this before, but I do it on my iPad. But I've got these little daily plan sheets that I use. You probably can't see that very well, but I use these little plan sheets, and my days are blocked off for different kinds of tasks, and I sort of keep a record of kind of what I'm doing, what my ambitions are for the day, all that kind of stuff. And time blocking is the only way I found to do that. You have to block time off for the things that matter. So if you want to get into flow state, number one, our team has discovered in a lot of its research that there's a high degree of correlation between operating in your motivation code and experiencing flow. So that's one thing. If you're operating in that core motivation, you're more likely to experience a state of flow, which is incredible. But second, if you want to get into flow, it's going to take time and space and focus. So you need to block off chunks of time for doing what Cal Newport calls deep work, if you want to really get into those states.
Great. Yeah. Do you have anything else you want to talk about the book or anything else that I missed?
No, I just think the problems we're facing today are not going to be solved by people phoning it in. And so we need all of us to better understand who we are, what drives us, how we can position ourselves to be ready to deliver at a moment's notice what it is that's required of us. And the only way really to do that is to understand what drives you, and then to bring that energy to your work every day instead of waiting for your work to energize you, which is probably not going to happen unless you understand what it is that really drives you. So that would be, I guess, the only other thing I would offer. And if you want to learn your motivation code, you can do it at motivationcode.com. Or you could read the book, The Motivation Code. Available now wherever books are sold.
I'm so grateful that Todd agreed to join us today. It was a privilege to speak with him, and also something I've been looking forward to for quite a while. One of the things that stood out to me is the idea of how much energy I've spent searching for the perfect job, and what it means to bring my motivation to my tasks instead of having my tasks be my motivation. Well, if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review wherever you're listening to this podcast. A few clicks and a star and some words means a lot, and it's how people find podcasts, and so we'd be very grateful for that. Until next time, I'm your host, Simon Yost. Music was provided by TP7 Productions, and this podcast was recorded, edited, and produced in St. Louis, Missouri. We'll see you next time.